My fiancé banned me from asking about his past. So I stopped letting him into my life. He panicked almost immediately. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I honestly believed I was about to marry my best friend. Ethan Carter and I had been together for 3 years and engaged for 8 months. Our wedding was set for the following spring. The venue was booked, my dress was hanging in my mother's guest room, and his mother had already taken over the planning as if the day belonged more to her than it did to us. Oddly enough, none of that stressed me out. Whenever people asked about Ethan, I always gave the same answer. He makes me feel safe. We told each other everything. Dreams, family problems, embarrassing memories, old relationships. Nothing ever felt off limits. He knew why I struggled to trust after my last relationship, and I knew about his difficult childhood, the year he nearly dropped out of college, and the 2 serious girlfriends he'd had before me. That's why what happened next caught me completely off guard. One rainy Sunday afternoon, we were sitting on the living room floor sorting old photos for the wedding slideshow his mother insisted on making. She already has enough pictures of me wearing braces to embarrass me for life, Ethan joked as he handed me another album. I laughed. Your mother thinks public humiliation is her love language. She thinks everything is. I opened the album expecting more college parties and football games. Instead, a single photograph stopped me. A woman I'd never seen before stood with one arm around Ethan's waist while his rested comfortably across her shoulders. They were smiling at the camera, and whatever they had clearly looked like more than friendship. I pointed at the picture. Who's that? Ethan's smile disappeared almost instantly. Nobody. I looked back at the photo. Nobody? Just someone I used to know. An ex? Instead of answering, he reached over and snapped the album shut. I don't want to talk about my past relationships. I frowned. That made no sense. We'd talked openly about our exes before. I knew about his college girlfriend, another woman he'd dated after graduation, and even a short-lived relationship he'd once laughed about. His past had never been a forbidden subject. I wasn't interrogating you, I said. I only asked who she was. I know. He set the album on the coffee table, took a slow breath, and looked at me with an expression that felt strangely rehearsed. I've been meaning to tell you something. From now on, my past is off limits. I waited for him to smile. I didn't. What does that mean? It means I don't want you asking about old relationships or anything that happened before we met. I slowly stood. Ethan, we're about to get married. I know. So why is this suddenly a problem? He folded his arms. I'm setting a boundary, Claire. I need you to respect it. His answer caught me completely off guard. I wasn't asking for every detail of his dating history, and I didn't think marriage meant owning every memory someone had. But this wasn't one uncomfortable story he wasn't ready to tell. How was it closing off an entire chapter of his life without giving me any reason why? I kept my voice calm. Can you at least help me understand? There's nothing to explain. Did something happen? No. Is there something you're ashamed of? His jaw tightened. You're turning this into an interrogation, and that's exactly why I don't want to talk about it. I'm asking because your reaction doesn't match the question. It does. You practically slammed the album shut. I closed it. You slammed it. He looked away instead of arguing, and the silence stretched between us. I searched his face for the man who had once stayed up until 3 a.m, helping me work through family problems. The same man who always said honesty was the reason our relationship worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. My past doesn't affect us. It has nothing to do with our future. Then why are you so determined to keep me away from it? I'm not. Then tell me what's really going on. His expression hardened. This conversation is over. Something inside me quietly settled. So let me be clear, I said. You're telling me your past is completely off limits, and if I ask about it again, we'll have a problem. Yes, there it was. Not a discussion, but an ultimatum. I could have argued or demanded answers, but I already knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, I simply nodded. Understood. The relief on his face was immediate. He kissed my forehead, packed the photo albums away, and spent the rest of the afternoon acting as though nothing had happened. I played along. We ordered dinner, watched half a movie, and even talked about the wedding. But the conversation kept replaying in my head. Ethan believed he'd drawn a line around his past. I never considered that lines worked both ways. The next morning, when he asked what my sister wanted, I answered, family stuff. That evening, he asked about a long video meeting. Work. 2 days later, he wanted to know my Saturday plans. Going out. With who? Some people. He frowned. What people? People I know. Now he looked genuinely confused. Why are you being so vague? I'm not being vague, I said calmly. I'm just keeping some things private. That's different. I smiled. How? He searched for an answer, but nothing came. I left for work without saying another word, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I decided to live by the same rule he had created. If his past belonged only to him, then parts of my life could belong only to me. Every answer was honest, but no more detailed than the ones he'd been giving me. About a week later, while we were cleaning the kitchen after dinner, he finally put down the dish towel and looked at me. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." He let out a quiet breath. "Why have you been so distant lately? You barely tell me anything anymore." I rinsed another plate before answering. "I'm just keeping some things private." "Since when?" "Since boundaries became important." His eyes narrowed. "Claire, that's not the same." I turned off the faucet and faced him. "You keep saying that, but you still haven't explained why. Your past is yours, but somehow my present isn't." He stood there in silence, searching for an answer that never came. A week earlier, I'd been the one asking for an explanation. Now our positions had quietly reversed. "You're twisting what I meant," he said at last. "I don't think I am. This isn't about winning." "I agree. It's about treating each other the same." Frustration flashed across his face before he walked upstairs without another word. One Friday evening, he watched me answer a text and finally asked, "Who's that?" "A friend." "What friend?" "Someone I know." He frowned. "You've never been this private before." I slipped my phone into my pocket and smiled. "Neither had you." The following night, he muted the television and looked at me. "I don't like this." "What don't you like?" "It feels like you're shutting me out." I held his gaze for a moment before answering. "I imagine that's exactly how it feels." His expression changed immediately. "Are you trying to punish me?" "No, I'm simply living with the same boundaries you asked me to respect." He started to argue, stopped halfway through, and looked away instead. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Ethan finally broke the silence. "My past isn't affecting our relationship. It already has." "How?" "The moment you decided an entire part of your life was off limits, you changed the rules for both of us." He let out a frustrated breath. "I asked for one boundary, and I'm respecting it." "But you're creating new ones." I shook my head. "No, I'm living by the same rule you asked me to accept." He stared at me, clearly expecting that explanation to fall apart under its own weight. When it didn't, frustration replaced confidence. "This is passive-aggressive." "It isn't." "It absolutely is." "No, Ethan, it's consistency. If privacy only belongs to one person, then it isn't really a boundary. It's a privilege." He opened his mouth as if he finally had an answer, then stopped. After several seconds, he simply turned away, walked upstairs, and closed the bedroom door harder than usual. It wasn't loud enough to be called a slam, but it was loud enough to make sure I heard it. The next afternoon, his mother called. Linda Carter had always treated me kindly, so I assumed she wanted to discuss wedding plans. Instead, she got straight to the point. "Claire, Ethan says you've been shutting him out. He's really upset." "I'm sorry he feels that way." There was a brief pause before she continued. "Whatever happened between you two, shutting each other out isn't healthy." "I agree. That's exactly why this started." I explained that Ethan had suddenly declared his entire past off limits and told me I wasn't allowed to ask questions anymore. I respected his decision, so I assumed privacy now worked both ways. Another silence followed. "That's different," she finally said. I smiled to myself because I'd heard those exact words all week. "Can I ask why?" "His past happened before you. My life is happening now." "Exactly. Then why does he deserve complete access to my present while I'm expected to accept permanent silence about his past?" She never answered the question. Instead, she called me immature and said relationships required compromise. "I already compromised," I replied. "I accepted the boundary he wanted. I simply stopped pretending it only applied to me." She quietly said she expected better from me before ending the call. I sat there for another minute, realizing how quickly people stopped calling something fair the moment it no longer favored the same person. Ethan was waiting when I got home. "You talked to my mother." "She called me." "You made me sound unreasonable." I told her exactly what happened. "You involved her the moment you asked for her support." He rubbed the back of his neck and looked away. "I just needed someone to talk to." "So did I. I never thought she'd call you." "I never asked her to." He sighed heavily. "I can't believe this has turned into such a huge problem." It became a problem the day honesty stopped working both ways. I looked at me for a long time before quietly saying, "I wish you'd just trust me." The words stung because they reminded me of the man I'd trusted completely for 3 years. "I did trust you," I said softly. "Then while we were planning our wedding, you suddenly decided there was an entire chapter of your life I wasn't even allowed to ask about." He lowered his eyes, and once again the silence told me more than any explanation could have. The next morning I came downstairs before he did. His phone was charging on the kitchen counter while he showered upstairs. I wasn't paying attention to it until the screen suddenly lit up with a single notification from a contact named "Do Not Answer." There was no preview, Only the name before the screen went dark again. I never touched the phone, but one question stayed with me for the rest of the morning. Who saves someone as do not answer instead of simply blocking them? I couldn't stop thinking about that question, but before I had time to make sense of it, the doorbell rang. Ethan's older sister, Megan, walked in without waiting to be invited. "We need to talk." She wasted no time. "You're being ridiculous." "So I've been told. My brother has every right to keep parts of his past private." "I've never argued with that." "Then why are you treating him like this?" "I'm treating him exactly the way he asked to be treated." She sighed in frustration. "There you go again. Everything has turned into some kind of lesson." "No," I replied. "It's about equality." She insisted his past belonged before our relationship and should stay there. "I know," I said. "The problem is, he decided I wasn't even allowed to ask about it." "Maybe he has a reason." "Then he should tell me." "He doesn't owe you every detail." "I never asked for every detail. I asked who the woman in the photograph was." For the first time, her expression changed. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. "You know who she is." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." She looked away, confirming what she never intended to admit. Whatever Ethan was hiding, his family already knew. Recovering quickly, she folded her arms again. "You're hurting him." "I didn't start this." "He feels like you're pulling away." I couldn't help giving a tired smile. "That's exactly how I felt." Her tone softened. "Claire, he loves you." "I believe he does." "Then stop pushing." "I'm not pushing." "What are you doing then?" "I'm waiting to see whether honesty still matters before we get married." She stared at me in disbelief. "You'd actually cancel the wedding over this?" "A week ago, I would have laughed at that question," I admitted. "Today, I'd cancel a marriage where honesty only applies to one person." She left without another word, but her visit only confirmed what had been bothering me since I found the photograph. None of those moments proved anything on their own, but together they were becoming impossible to ignore. That evening, Ethan came home looking exhausted. Megan came by. "She did. I'm sorry everyone got involved." "You didn't drag them into this," I said. "You told them your version, and they chose a side." He stepped closer. "I hate this." "So do I. I miss us." "I miss us too." For a moment, he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with. "Can't we just move on?" I looked at him in disbelief. "Move on from something we've never actually talked about?" "It's in the past. It stopped being just the past the moment you made it a secret." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "I don't know how to explain it." "You mean you won't?" After a long silence, he finally whispered, "There are things I'm not proud of." "What things?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I can't." In that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't searching for the right words anymore. He'd already decided I wasn't going to hear them. "I think I need some space." His head snapped up. "What?" "I'm staying with Emily for a few days. We can work this out here." "We've been saying that all week." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back before he could take it. "Claire, I love you." "I know. I love you too." "I believe you." "Then don't leave." I swallowed hard. "I don't know how to stay." That night I packed a single suitcase while Ethan stood quietly in the doorway. Neither of us cried. Neither of us argued. Somehow the silence hurt more than either of those things could have. Emily was already waiting outside when I came downstairs. "You ready?" I nodded. Just before I reached the car, Ethan caught my wrist. "Please, don't let this be how we end." I looked at him for a long moment before gently pulling free. "Then don't let secrets be how we begin." The drive to Emily's house passed mostly in silence. "You don't have to explain anything," she said eventually. "I know, but if you want to." I stared out the window. "I don't even know what I'm trying to understand anymore." "You think he's hiding something?" "I know he is." "You think he's cheating?" I shook my head. "I honestly don't know, and somehow that's even worse, because when you don't know the truth, your mind starts inventing one." The first night at Emily's house, I barely slept. My phone never stopped buzzing with missed calls and messages from Ethan. "Please come home. We can fix this. I don't want to lose you. Please answer." I read every message, but didn't reply to a single one. By the next morning, his mother, his sister, and even a couple of his friends had joined in. They all seemed convinced I was overreacting. One message claimed Ethan was falling apart, while another accused me of emotionally punishing him for no reason. I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking my phone, expecting the same honesty he'd always expected from me was emotional punishment. That was a new one. Later that afternoon, Emily and I were making dinner when my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Daniel, a mutual friend who worked evenings at a wine bar downtown. "Hey, I wasn't sure whether I should tell you this. I saw Ethan here last night. He wasn't alone." My stomach tightened. "Who was he with?" A few seconds passed before another message appeared. I don't know her name, dark hair, around his age. They weren't acting romantic, but they spent a long time talking. She cried, and at one point he reached across the table and held her hand. I read the message twice before setting my phone down. Emily noticed immediately. What happened? Without saying anything, I handed her the phone. She read the conversation, then looked back at me. Do you think it was the woman from the photograph? I don't know, I admitted. But too many pieces are starting to point in the same direction. Emily squeezed my hand, and we stood there in silence for a long time. Neither of us needed to say anything. For the first time since all of this had started, I couldn't convince myself Ethan was simply protecting his privacy anymore. Between the photograph, the contact named Do Not Answer, and now this meeting, every answer only seemed to raise another question. The next afternoon, Ethan showed up at Emily's front door looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look older than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Emily glanced between us before heading upstairs. I'll give you two some privacy. Once we were alone, Ethan remained standing. I'll explain everything. I'm listening. Hein took a long breath before finally saying, There's someone from my past. I didn't interrupt. It lasted a lot longer than I ever admitted, and she was married. For a second, I couldn't process what I'd heard. You knowingly had an affair with a married woman? Yes. For how long? About 4 years. 4 years. Not one impulsive mistake, but years of choosing the same secret every single day. Were you together before we met? Yes. And it was completely over? I hesitated. We still talked sometimes. Sometimes? He nodded. For the last 3 years, every answer felt heavier than the one before. While we planned vacations, chose wedding venues, and talked about building a future together, he had quietly kept another woman in his life. A memory flashed through my mind. The contact saved as Do Not Answer. Was that her? His expression answered before his words did. Yes. I saw the notification, I said before he could accuse me of looking through his phone. Why save her like that instead of blocking her? I kept telling myself not to answer. I held his gaze. Were you reminding yourself or trying to convince yourself? I looked away. Instead of pressing him, I asked the question that had been bothering me ever since Daniel's message. Were you with her at the wine bar? Yes. So Daniel was right. I looked surprised. Daniel? A mutual friend saw you. Ethan rubbed his forehead. She contacted me first. She said she wanted closure. I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. So while I was staying at my sister's house because you refused to tell me the truth, you met the married woman you'd secretly stayed in contact with? It wasn't like that. What was it like? Hang hesitated. She told me she regretted choosing her husband. I felt my stomach knot. And how did that make you feel? I don't know. I shook my head. Yes, you do. I was confused. No, Ethan. I looked him straight in the eyes. You were flattered. I never denied it. That was when everything finally made sense. This had never been just about hiding his past. Somewhere inside him, he still needed to know whether Vanessa would have chosen him if life had gone differently. I took a slow breath. I need one honest answer. Have you spoken to Vanessa at any point during our relationship? Yes. How often? I honestly don't know. What did you talk about? Life. Did you ever tell me about those conversations? No. Why? I knew you'd be upset. I gave him a sad smile. So you knew it was wrong. I knew it would look wrong. No. I quietly shook my head. You knew it was wrong. He covered his face with both hands. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. The problem was that his apology arrived 3 years too late. I slipped my engagement ring off and placed it on the coffee table between us. I can't wear this anymore. His face lost all color. I'll block her. This isn't about blocking her. I'll change my number. It isn't about your phone. I'll do whatever it takes. I believe you, I said. But people usually promise to change only after they've run out of ways to hide. He closed his eyes. I kept telling myself I'd explain everything eventually. You had 3 years, Ethan. I glanced at the ring. You never told me about her. You kept seeing her, kept talking to her. And the only reason we're having this conversation is because your secret finally caught up with you. He quietly broke down. I love you. I know. Please don't let this end. I looked at the man I'd planned to spend the rest of my life with. I think it ended long before today. I just didn't know it yet. He stared at the ring for several seconds before quietly asking, So, this is really over? I think it's been over for a while. I never stopped loving you. I believe that. Then why can't we fix this? Because love isn't what broke. What did? Trust. After a long silence, he nodded. If I told you everything the day you asked, we probably wouldn't be standing here. He understood immediately. Without another argument, he walked out the front door. I watched from the window as he stood beside his car for a long time before finally driving away. Only after the taillights disappeared did I realize I'd been holding my breath. Emily came downstairs, sat beside me, and quietly took my hand. She never asked another question, and I was grateful she didn't. The following morning, I returned to our apartment while Ethan was at work. I wasn't looking for another confrontation. I just wanted a clean ending. The place looked exactly as we'd left it. 2 coffee mugs still sat in the sink, his running shoes were by the front door, and our wedding invitations were spread across the dining table, waiting for decisions that would never be made. I packed only what belonged to me, leaving behind everything that carried more memories than value. The espresso machine I'd given Ethan for our first Christmas together was still on the kitchen counter, along with the television we'd bought as a couple. I left both behind. I wasn't interested in arguing over furniture. Peace mattered more. By early afternoon, everything that belonged to me was packed into Emily's SUV. Before leaving, I walked through the apartment one last time. The bedroom, the kitchen, the little balcony, where we'd spend countless evenings planning a future that no longer existed. I took the engagement ring from my pocket, placed it in the center of the kitchen table beside my apartment key, and quietly closed the door behind me without looking back. The phone started ringing before I was halfway to Emily's house. Ethan called first, followed by his mother and Megan. I ignored every call. The voicemails became more desperate as the day went on. Please come home. We can work through this. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. That evening, Ethan's mother left a message accusing me of abandoning him over one argument. The next morning, his father called for the first time. Relationships aren't simple, he said. People make mistakes. Real women don't walk away when things get difficult. I deleted the message without replying. A few days later, Ethan and I met at a quiet coffee shop to exchange the last of our belongings. The conversation stayed polite, almost painfully so, until he quietly said he'd blocked Vanessa and hadn't spoken to her since. I'm glad, I replied. You believe me? I do. Hope briefly returned to his face. Then maybe. He stopped himself, but I already knew what he wanted to ask. If you believe me now, why can't we fix this? Instead, he looked down at his coffee. I keep wishing I could go back. So do I. I would have handled everything differently. I believe that. I looked up. You still think people can change? I do. Then why is this over? Because changing today doesn't erase what happened yesterday. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I stood. I should go. As I turned away, he quietly said, I'm sorry. There was no excuse left in his voice, only regret. I know, I answered before walking away. 6 months later, I finally understood something I'd missed while we were together. Our engagement didn't end the day I returned the ring. It ended the moment honesty became something I had to earn while mine was expected without question. The breakup created more problems than I expected. Ethan and I exchanged a few emails about practical matters, settled the lease, and divided our remaining expenses without lawyers. Several people told me to fight harder for reimbursement, but I paid my share and moved on. Losing money hurt, but staying emotionally connected to someone I no longer trusted would have cost far more. For a while, I became the villain in stories I never got to hear. I never defended myself. Eventually, people started asking questions on their own, and when they finally heard the full story, several admitted they judged me too quickly. By then, I no longer needed anyone else's approval. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Lauren, Vanessa's ex-wife. She apologized for disturbing me and explained she'd found my number during the divorce investigation. She explained that her attorney had been contacting several people connected to Vanessa while putting together a timeline for the divorce. The investigation uncovered years of evidence showing the affair had continued far longer than she'd ever imagined. Before we ended the call, I asked the question I had been avoiding. Did Ethan and Vanessa end up together? For a while, she said. They moved in together, but it didn't last. What happened? Lauren gave a quiet laugh. Vanessa found messages from another woman at his office. I closed my eyes. After everything I'd learned, I couldn't even say I was surprised anymore. After we hung up, I didn't feel satisfied or vindicated. I just felt sad. I'd spent weeks wondering if Vanessa had somehow won, only to realize they'd repeated the same cycle that destroyed everyone around them. A few mutual friends later apologized for believing Ethan's version of the story. I would have never judged you if I'd known everything. I thanked them, but apologies couldn't rewrite the past. As for Ethan, I genuinely hope he finds peace someday. Not because I want him back, but because people who never confront the truth usually carry the same wounds into their next relationship. A few weeks ago, Emily asked me one final question. If you could go back to the day you found that photograph, would you still ask who she was? I smiled. Absolutely. Even knowing how everything turned out. Especially knowing That photograph didn't destroy my engagement. It simply exposed the truth that had been there all along. Looking back, the hardest decision wasn't leaving. It was refusing to mistake unequal love for a relationship worth saving. Walking away hurt, but staying, would have meant spending the rest of my life accepting a version of love where honesty only applied to one person. Losing Ethan didn't make me stop believing in love. It only taught me that love without honesty will never be enough.